So for me, obviously, as I said, the losing part isn't good, but I'm not someone that looks at things from a negative point of view. I try and keep a positive head on my shoulders. So I took the loss, good pace fight, whatnot, and I'm going to build on it to make sure I get my hands raised next time. I've got different coaches, different trainers. I'm more sparring with southpaws, obviously. It's been a lot more intense, that's for sure.
What do you make of Usyk's physique? He looks like he's bulked up for this fight. Is that saying to you that he's coming for a war?
Yeah, definitely. It's been a blessing to me, being in Saudi Arabia. It's been good to me. It's been good to me for the 4 weeks I've been here. I just need that luck to carry on one more week.
In the desert, Anthony Joshua shares a moment.
16 to 112 for the winner by split decision. And still the unified heavyweight champion of the world from Ukraine, Oleksandr Usyk.
Tears for Oleksandr.
Just a few days ago on Saturday in Saudi Arabia, the entire boxing world witnessed the second bout between Oleksandr Usyk and Anthony Joshua, whereby Usyk was defending his heavyweight titles against AJ, and for the very first time, AJ walked in as the clear underdog in his attempt to right his wrongs. Fortunately for Usyk and unfortunately for Joshua, Usyk showed himself as a superior fighter that night by showing a true masterclass. And within the existence of my entire life on this earth, I have never, ever seen AJ or any other professional fighter for that matter to act in the way that Joshua responded afterwards. I thought I'd never see an individual going rogue on stage, literally throwing championship belts like it's a game of frisbee, or while giving a long-winded post-fight soliloquy, and to top this all off, then going backstage by cussing out a bystander in response to his comment. I do truly understand that AJ was subjected to his emotions and was under immense pressure to perform, but damn, that sure wasn't the right time to act the way he acted and to say what he said. It's a certain reminder which shows that fighters experience real life emotions that can lead to genuine frustrations, eventually resulting to an emotional breakdown, and I think that's what we all witnessed that night. And to make this extremely clear, especially to the guys with their pitchforks down in the comments, I do not justify or condone the way he acted, but I also believe there's a right time and certainly a more appropriate way to go about things, and most definitely he could have acted much more professionally. Even for me watching back home, I found it very tough to watch and at times felt somewhat embarrassed as he continued. Now, when we truly focus on their rematch performance, we realized that their second fight transpired in a much different way compared to their first bout in late September. Although Joshua ended up losing again down to decision, both fighters showed us a different aspect of their game. When I truly look back, this fight had me on the edge of my seat screaming at the highest decibel vocally possible at my TV. And with regards to entertainment value, this was a much better fight compared to the first. But this time around, Joshua showed much more improvement as he established a more methodical approach to the fight by being more intentional with his punching selection. AJ employed a wider range of body shots and jabs to make Usyk's job this time around much harder, and I believe he asserted himself more physically as well as anchoring himself within the middle of the ring by ultimately not backing down easily. Although Oleksandr was the smaller and lighter man, Joshua was still not able to fully match the pace, but he did certainly keep up at times, but then finally gassed out at the final 4 rounds of the fight. Now, Usyk showed that he can truly rise above any level of his competition even despite coming with a much higher intensity. Although Usyk previously defeated Joshua, I believe Usyk still had to make fair adjustments to combat Joshua's much different game plan. We saw for once that power shots to the body actually made Usyk uncomfortable, which then forced him to adjust his rhythm. And through the opening 6 rounds, AJ made it much more difficult for Usyk to get deep into his technical bag. But throughout, Usyk showed that his counters as well as his jab cross combos proved far too overwhelming for Joshua. I personally believe that this performance might have been the best we've seen from AJ. Despite this, Usyk still showed who was unquestionably the better skilled fighter as he put on a spectacular clinic and doubled down with a boxing masterclass during the championship rounds. In short, AJ displayed a good fighting performance that night, whereas Usyk displayed an even far greater one, and I believe that the better skilled fighter rightfully won. I then thought to myself, was AJ's rematch the worst possible performance in heavyweight history? We've seen many terrible performances where we witnessed great fighters losing shocking defeats, and would literally have you questioning the entire legacy of that fighter. But was this truly the worst performance that we've ever seen though? Well, I checked. I scoured through many prominent rematches of some of the greatest fighters within the modern history of the division, and the answer to this might not exactly be what you expect. Okay, here's a graphic that shows the rematch performances of notable heavyweights that lost their first bout. To the left on the y-axis, we have their performance scores indicated by their overall points, and at the bottom, just above the x-axis, we have the fighters. Here you will find the rematch winners at the top, and conversely the rematch losers at the bottom of this graph. And to quickly clarify, I adopted the use of a performance scoring system in hope to provide better context on the matter. For instance, a fighter who won their rematch by KO would achieve 10 points, meanwhile a fighter that won their rematch by unanimous decision would only achieve 4 points. And on the flip side, if a fighter were to lose their rematch, the same would also be true but would instead receive minus points. After looking at this graphic, you'll begin to recognize prolific fighters when you look closer, and so this region right here is the legacy tarnishing zone. If a fighter has a performance that lands them within this zone, it might lead to severe criticisms of that fighter, and might also leave a huge question mark against their boxing legacy. Within this region, you will see more than a handful of very noticeable fighters with potentially the worst boxing performances we've ever witnessed in history. But do you know what rematch you'll never see in this region? It's Dillian Whyte's commendable rematch against Oleksandr Povetkin in March 2021. Unfortunately for Whyte, he might have experienced probably the worst way you could ever lose a fight, by literally getting left for dead with an uppercut you would honestly see from Street Fighter. And in their rematch bout the following year, the body snatcher redeemed this loss by slumping Povetkin by a TKO victory. Muhammad Ali achieved his most prolific moment that cemented his legacy back in 1974. At this point, Ali had suffered his first career loss against Joe Frazier just 3 years prior, and ultimately lost out on his championship belts during the process. And then by their rematch fight, Ali put on a tremendous show and outclassed Frazier in a convincing victory by unanimous decision. As monumental as this career-defining victory was, it doesn't exactly compare to Mike Tyson's rematch against Evander Holyfield in 1997. With just a few years prior, Iron Mike had experienced his second loss after being defeated by Buster Douglas in one of the most shocking upsets within boxing history. Similar to his previous bout against Douglas, Michael was defeated by a crushing 11th round TKO victory in favour of Holyfield. And then by their rematch fight, with immense pressure from both his critics and his opposition, Iron Mike could no longer handle the pressure and did the unimaginable. This man literally bit off his ear. Honestly, I ain't even making this stuff up. And due to this, Tyson and his corner were disqualified for biting, which then added another loss to his legacy. But do you know what else is extremely unfortunate? It's Floyd Patterson's rematch against Sonny Liston all the way back in 1963. Just hear me out. This probably might be the worst performance you'll see on this list, especially if you were to consider the outcome of their previous fight. Now, Patterson in both of his fights against Liston lasted no longer than 50 seconds due to getting knocked out twice within the opening rounds of both fights. Now talk about being unfortunate. Now, believe it or not, there are also fighters among this list who were extremely successful during their rematches. Lennox Lewis, the former undisputed heavyweight champion, defeated Hasim Rahman by KO in 2001. Here is Evander Holyfield when he fought against Michael Moore in his rematch and achieved a corner stoppage in 1997. Derek Chisora earlier this year back in April was able to avenge his loss against Kubrat Pulev with a victory in way of split decision, while in spectacular fashion, Jack Dempsey was able to crush Jim Flynn by a knockout victory all the way back in 1918. We have now seen fighters that have either tarnished their legacy or were just about able to revive it with a stellar performance. And so, where exactly does Joshua's performance against Usyk rank on this chart? Well, right here. Still very far from some of the worst rematches we've ever seen. And so, was Joshua able to defeat Usyk? No. Was Joshua able to rise up to the challenge to regain his championship titles back? No. He was quite far from it, especially by his own standards. So then, which is worse? Getting outboxed in plain fashion to arguably the finest pound for pound fight in the world, or by getting plastered by a brutal knockout which left you out cold on a canvas junior rematch? And if you thought that this was the worst performance that we've ever seen from a heavyweight fighter, well then, you're wrong. And if this is the worst that we've ever seen and will ever seen from AJ, then it might actually be a whole lot better compared to the others that we've seen. Floyd Patterson was literally destroyed twice in back-to-back fights, where he wasn't able to make it past an entire round in both scheduled bouts. Derek Chisora, who took a wonderful beating from Tyson Fury, finally gave up in his corner, which ultimately led to a corner stoppage. And Mike Tyson, who literally had no other option than to bite his opponent's ear off just because he couldn't handle the heat. Now, don't get it twisted. Joshua was still outclassed and rightfully lost to the better man that night, and you just can't deny this reality. Even despite this, we were able to witness a slightly more polished version of Joshua, as he was able to show only just a few times during the fight that he was able to give one of the greatest pound for pound fighters a run for his money. Thank you all for tuning into this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.
And I just want to say, Bismillah.